Dr. Deborah L. Ruf earned a PhD in tests and measurement with a minor in learning and cognition at the University of Minnesota. She worked as a private consultant and specialist in gifted assessment, test interpretation, and guidance for the gifted for 30 years. Among her volunteer roles, she served as the National Gifted Children Program Coordinator for American Mensa from 2003 to 2008. And Dr. Ruf was awarded the Mensa Foundation's Intellectual Benefits Award in 2007 for her professional work in the field of intelligence. Having been a parent, classroom teacher, and administrator in elementary through graduate education, she continues to write and speak about school issues and social and emotional adjustment of gifted children and adults. Dr. Ruf maintains an interest in educational policy, particularly how to set up schools that meet not only academic, but social and emotional needs of children through grouping and instruction with true peers. She's the author of the award-winning book, Losing Our Minds, Gifted Children Left Behind, 2005, and retitled 5 Levels of Gifted, School Issues and Educational Options in 2009. Her focus has now progressed toward the social and emotional health of the gifted adults who parent gifted children. Her most recent invited paper, How Parental Viewpoint and Personality Affected Gifted Child Outcomes, 2020, in the Gifted Child International Journal, looks into specific parent-child interactions of the subject families from the 5 Levels book. For more than 40 years, Dr. Ruf has served as a keynote speaker, workshop, and conference presenter, and written chapters for 5 textbooks, more than 12 peer-reviewed journal articles, and 100+ articles and handouts for newsletters, magazines, and websites. And tonight, she presents to us, Is High Intelligence a Ticket to Ease and Prosperity? Not exactly. Welcome, Dr. Ruf.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hess. It's very nice to be here in my office. I hope it, I mean, you know, I am a little clutter bug. So, but I like you to have a nice view to look at when I'm doing podcasts.
Nice, nice. I'm going to go ahead and share your PowerPoint if we're ready for that.
I'm ready.
All right. And I'm just going to disappear into the background while I get this shared up. Okay. Looks like we're good.
I don't see me, so I don't know if I'm making funny faces, but I can deal with it. All right. So as you said, is high intelligence a ticket to ease and prosperity? Not exactly. And people, when I tell them what I do for my passion, for my living, for my avocation, I say I'm a high intelligence specialist, and they say, what does that mean? And I said, well, I work with gifted people. Oh, gifted children. I said, no, gifted people from birth to death, the whole gamut. And then they say, oh, so what are you doing now? And they assume that everyone who's gifted or smart is going to be successful. And that's the first question they ask. How many of them are really successful that you studied? And I said, well, it depends on your opinion of what success is. So let's move forward. So I did an 18-year follow-up study, and I got 65 of the original 78 kids from the book who are now in their 20s, 30s, and 40s to talk to me about their lives. And we almost kind of like worked together I had the questions, but of course I tried to let them just go where they wanted with the questions. And so this book, the gifted, let's see, the 5 levels of gifted children grown up, what they tell us, is about what I discovered and also what they said personally about the different topics. So there is a question that really rose to the top for me, I didn't ask them. I did sort of ask them, but they didn't know what it was at the time. What is a good fit for a gifted child? Well, it depends. And we're going to talk more about that. What are parental viewpoints? Well, you probably have an idea right away. It's how do the parents see things? And that has a lot to do with what ends up happening in the life of the gifted child. What do they think is right? What do they think their child should be doing? What do they think is important? How do they see success? And then what do parent and child personality type preferences show us? Well, for one thing, it shows us that where the parents are coming from can often be pretty well predicted by their personality type. And by personality type, I mean on the Myers-Briggs. So in my writing since my first book, I already had all of the personality types of those people. But I had a publisher who wisely suggested I not include everything I was thinking, because I had a more reasonable length book then than I do now. But I might turn this book that's pretty big into 3 main books that are smaller. So egg me on if you think that's a good idea. So what do parent and child type preferences show us? It shows us that when their personalities are similar, they don't have a whole lot of problems. Now, that doesn't mean the guidance is perfect or any of those normal things, but it means they're kind of understanding each other. When there's a conflict between personality types, it can be a problem, and it can be a problem that the parent and child deal with even after the kids are grown up. And what are some different outcomes of all of this? That's what I'll try and talk about. Okay, move. Now, you're my first audience since I published the book. And so I'm still tinkering with how to get all the thoughts about how many people do become financially successful, emotionally successful. They're not necessarily one and the same or in the same person. And having alignment with your parents can make a big difference in how you feel about yourself. There's going to be more resilience in kids who have at least one parent who really thinks they're pretty great. And however, if they have siblings, it could be a problem for them. So I have kids, I can tell you it's like a no-win thing sometimes. But I also in my book teach people how to apologize. But that's another topic. So I would like you, of course, to read the 5 levels of gifted children grown up. And I also am publishing snippets in all kinds of different places that won't cost you anything if you don't have the time or the money to buy the book. But it is, be prepared. You should be able to dog ear it, make notes, and so on, because it isn't just about you as parents. It's also about if you have kids who are already grown up, it's about you as a gifted person. How did your parents treat you? So we've got a lot of that in the book. Then I have, we've posted my email address, deborah.ruf@gmail.com, because it's our best way to give you the handouts. If you want handouts from me, write to me at deborah.ruf@gmail.com, and I will send them to you. But you know, I'll tell you, I'm an ENTP, so I'm very well intentioned and outgoing, but sometimes I get kind of flustered with all the piles of things I want to do. So that's pretty typical of my personality type, but you can always remind me I'm very hard to offend. No worries. Now, I would like you to have a good estimate of yours and your child's level of giftedness, and that's one of the handouts I want to give you, okay? Because you really can estimate theirs. And when you read the book, you start to see yourself in it too, and you start to get a better sense of where you fit. And it's happy, it's sad, it makes you think, but it's part of growing. It's part of growing. So let's move. Oh, wait, before we move on, I do want you also to be aware of a place where you can get a really good Myers-Briggs test free or very cheap. It's called www.personalitypage.com. www.personalitypage.com. And they're totally good. And I ended up using those for my clients just to save them money because it was easy to do. And the website is rich in feedback on relationships and goals and so on about people who have different kinds of personality types. Okay, move on. So I worked with 65 American gifted children. Now, not all of them stayed in the United States since I knew them, but I still know them, and they agreed to talk to me. And I also use social media to track people down. And sometimes as a last resort, I reached out to parents who hadn't moved yet and I could find the kids. But I didn't want it to be about what the parents were saying anymore. I wanted it to be unfettered truth-telling by the subjects. The subjects' ability profiles are in a range from bright, moderately gifted, is really what that means, to exceptionally and profoundly gifted levels of giftedness. And their age range now, by the end of the study, was 25 to 44. By the end of the study, which I pretty much in January of 2020, maybe 21, I said, okay, I'm not asking any more questions. I've got to write this book. Then the results indicate that parental personality and viewpoint make a significant difference in outcomes. For instance, the prevailing types for the people who brought their children in for assessment is a fascinating subject in itself. And I'll ask me a question later and I'll tell you more about it. Okay, move on. So what is a good fit? Sometimes it's called a maximal fit. Sometimes it's called other things I can't think of right now, but it means it's a psychological kind of thing too. When you fit in your environment, you're just comfortable. You're unfettered. You aren't worried about what others are thinking. You aren't bored. It's good for you. So in this study, I looked closely to see, asked some questions, plus I used information from the first book too. So I added to it and completed it as they got older. A good or bad fit occurs in any environment that surrounds a child, like home, family, neighborhood, school, religious youth group, summer camp, and activities groups. And that explains why some of the places you can think of for yourself worked and some didn't. Like you might have gone to a camp that was awful, but your church group was a very good fit for you, or you might have not liked any of the small groups, but you liked the swimming team or being in plays. Each of those gives you a whole new environment that might work for you. So even if not everything works for you or your child, I want parents to let the kids be in some of those environments that work best for them as often as is feasible. Next. The first focus is on the school or other educational environment, okay? Factors that can affect school fit. Where does the family live? What kind of district is it? What other kinds of people are there as far as their learning, their goals? If your child is really, really smart, but your child is in a school or you were in a school where you were acting like a snob if you talked about going on to college. That would be a problem. It would be more comfortable for you to be around others who had just natural expectations that, of course, we're going on to college. So that's what I mean by an educational fit. That's the social and goals fit. Also, what are the parents looking for in a school? Are they looking for you to get good grades? Are you looking for your kids to get good grades? Or are you looking for them to be learning, not stalled, but not doing busy work very often? Busy work is okay sometimes, but not most of the time. What values or past experiences drive their decisions as their children start school? I can tell you that when my kids started school and people would bring up, well, what about their social and emotional? I could not have been less interested, I blush to say, because actually now that's my focus. And it's because I learned, oh my gosh, that is the most important thing. And sometimes a good academic fit is one of the parts of the bus that gives you what you need for the emotional growth and happiness. If you are, I call it, well, when I taught school, I used to call kids who were in a good place as having, forgot. I am getting old. Anyway, gainfully employed. They were gainfully employed. And by that, I mean, there's enough flexibility, there's enough challenge, there's enough being around other kids that you can bounce ideas off that make you enjoy being there. So that's another kind of what, is there any of that in the school? But your personality will affect how much of that you need or want. Okay, move on. So who else attends the school? Might you find a bosom buddy, a true peer, somebody you will be friends with even when you're old and gray because you really clicked? Or are you always going to be the outlier? Or are you going to be in over your head? I mean, as a gifted person, there's a relativity to it, which a lot of us discover when we get into our first really hard courses, whenever that is. We might have breezed through things for many years, and then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I'm not the smartest one in the class. Or maybe you're not the most prepared one in the class, and there's a difference. Because sometimes we feel overwhelmed simply because we don't yet have the background. Does the school allow any ability grouping or movement to different grade levels? Often, those artificial controls of grade level can really be a problem. And it depends on your child's or your level of giftedness, just how significant it is. But it still depends on what school you're in, because one school may have a lower average ability range than another school. Does the school individualize the instruction and grouping at all? Is there flexibility? When teachers teach to a whole class, especially in elementary school, that's not going to reach all the kids in the same way. I say a lot about that in the first book, which is the 5 levels of gifted, school issues and educational options. And it's still for sale because I laid it all out so that people would still be finding things. Schools have not changed that much since I published that book. How open is the school to working with the parents and their child? Or is the family expected to accept what the school offers? Sometimes you'll have people, even in charge of gifted programs, who will say, well, if the parents would just get out of our way and let us do our work, and they don't want to listen to them. They don't want to listen to the parents, which can be very painful, first of all, and short-sighted, because the educators don't know your child the way you do. So I look for a give and take. But I also look for people who have some background, some people in the school that have some background in what intelligence is and how kids can be different in the way they learn, that one size does not fit all. So again, oh, and one of the ways to do this is simply sign up somewhere in any school, public, private, whatever, to go visit for a half day where your child is with another child at about the same age, and you have a chance to kind of follow and look into different rooms to see, with permission, obviously, but to see what are they working on in this grade level. And then you have a better idea of what questions to still ask. Okay, move. So we'll start with some of the questions you might be asking so far about the study and about the school fit. And Mark will take over right now. I can't hear you.
For some reason, my mouse is not working well. Sorry. So if you have questions, please drop them into the live chat on Facebook. I'll be able to field those for Dr. Ruf. And I have a couple questions while we're waiting for some questions to come in. Could you tell us a little bit more about the Myers-Briggs? I know some people are very, very familiar with it, and some people may be hearing about it for the first time. I always get confused about what are all the association letters, and I know you don't have to explain all of them, but could you just give it a little bit more?
Well, yes. I will send you this sheet that I love this sheet. I made it for some paper years ago, and I've tweaked it every now and then, and it's in my current new book, but I call it Gifted Child Personality / Behaviors and School / Parent Viewpoints. And what it does is talk about the different factors of the Myers-Briggs, which are, there are 4 continua. One is extrovert to introvert. Another is sensing to intuiting. Another is feeling to thinking. And then the last one is judging to perceiving. And it helps when, like, I've been immersing myself in it for a long time, and I still, I just kind of sense what somebody's going to be like when I've seen their personality profile. And it works, but it only works if you're, if you read up on it on the sites like personalitypage.com. And when I would have consultations with the parents after the testing was done, I would have their personality types and their child's personality types. And believe me, they can change over your life because it has to do with where you are then. And so when people say, oh, they aren't accurate, well, what they are is they give you a snapshot of how somebody's operating right now. And what I found is the J, judging people, that's the very last one, judging and perceiving. J, judgers like to settle things. They tend to be organized. The P, perceivers, tend to be kind of like, well, it depends. And when you talk about who's going to be a more cooperative student, J, judgers are more cooperative students. They just, well, that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to do it. And aren't you proud of me? I got it done. Well, the P, perceivers are like, well, why do we have to do this? And what if I already know it? And why do I have to show my work? And guess who brings, of the parents, J's or P's to get evaluated and helped? The overwhelming majority of the leading parent has a personality type that ends in J, and they are bringing in those kids they're worried about who are P perceivers, the ones who have the P, because thinking, My child is twice exceptional. My child has dysgraphia. My child has the executive function disorder. And not that these can't be real things, but if you know the personality, you can get a better sense first of whether you're overreacting. And so the P and the J are really significant when they're different between parents and kids. And when you get to know more and more about it, you also can kind of guess what your parents were like. And that will help you know whether you two had a fit, a good fit, not like a being mad at each other fit. So another thing that makes a big difference is the feeling or thinking. Feelers wear their hearts on their sleeves and they want to please you and they want you to be happy. The thinkers are more practical in the way they decide to do or not do things or react to things. So a person who's a thinker is less likely to be, well, they kind of can brush you off. They don't even notice that you're trying to insult them because it just isn't that important. But a feeler, oh my gosh, they're going to lose sleep. They're going to cry. They're going to have trouble. And if the parent is a J and a thinker, they may seem very insensitive to their FP, feeler perceiver child. And the child will spend most of their lives trying to please that parent. And it doesn't mean the parent isn't pleased. It just means they don't show it the same way. So it can be an issue. And knowing that by taking the personality types and reading up on what it means, and it's free on the website, that website personality page. So those are two real key things. Then the extrovert or the introvert. Extroverts want to do what everyone else is doing. They don't fret about whether it's boring or not. It's about being with the other people. So you can't get an individual plan for them. They will submarine it. They won't cooperate because if they're extroverts, it's not about the work. It's about the other people. So they'll be great leaders, but you try and grade skip them. If they've already got some friends, they don't want to look like they're showing off or elite. They'll vote to stay behind rather than leave their friends. Intuitives, the intuitives. Oh no, we're on introvert. Introverts, you can get them to work on their own. They don't want a lot of friends. They want one or two good friends. And even if they don't have one or two good friends yet, they will read ahead, they will work on their own. And it makes a big difference in how you plan for them in their school. And I hope you can see if they're an extrovert, it's harder to tell whether they really belong where you've got them. They may be learning to underachieve because they aren't complaining about being bored. They only feel bored when they don't have any friends around. And then the two in the middle there, sensing and intuiting. Sensors are to an intuitive. A sensor is obtuse. I'll just say it. I'm an intuitive. My dad is a sensor, and he just, he compartmentalizes. They're really good at. You tell them what to do, and like memorize a list. They'll memorize the list. Intuitives want to be able to recreate the list. They want to not be knocked off compass by being told, well, you've got to use the formula. Well, if I didn't learn what the formula was made of ahead of time, I won't remember it. But if I have learned it properly, I can recreate it later. And so a child who is an intuitive, and there are fewer intuitives, a child who is an intuitive is going to ask, but what are we doing? They don't want to just be told, do this. whereas the censor is willing to just do this. And so teachers and kids, gifted kids, they're more intuitive gifted kids in the elementary school setting, while there are more censor teachers in the elementary setting. And by high school, more intuitive teachers show up. And that's when it starts to make more sense to a lot of intuitive gifted kids. Okay, there. Got you started.
I bet everybody was kind of going through those and comparing their own mind and their own kids with them. By the way, we've got a really active chat going, one of the most active chats going that I've seen during conversations with CAGT, which is really cool. But I want to ask you this.
Yes.
Do you want me to save some of those questions for the next Q&A part? Because there's a couple questions in there. Do you want to move on, or do you want to do
let's
a couple
move on
questions?
and you can save the questions. Plus, you know,
there's some good questions out there.
And
in the meantime, feel free to talk amongst yourselves, chat people. This is a good chat going on here, but I will come back to some of these questions when I can. Okay, so let's move on. There's going to be a couple more Q&A sessions, everybody. So be patient.
Oh yeah.
All right.
And advancing it. Okay.
Okay, I gotta get this working where I can advance it.
Okay, what is a parental viewpoint? A parental viewpoint is about how the parent looks at the outcome goals for the child's life. Examples include possibilities that they may have these views. Okay, the school should meet the child's needs, or the child should cooperate and be a good student, or the parent should make sure the child does everything right. Success means how you define success, or the parent defines success, has a lot to do with their expectations. Move on. Parental viewpoints are part, oh, and I have a typo, I apologize. By the time I noticed it, I had already given it to Mark. Parental viewpoints are part of all different kinds of effects of good fit. Okay, so that means they will see a good fit differently, perhaps, than the child. Parents decide whether to stay or go. They've got the power. The kid doesn't. Sometimes the child does, but the parent ultimately has to say yes or no. And parents, have lots of reasons why they might say yes or no. Even if they want the child, they have what the child wants. Parents conclude that their child is doing fine, falling short, or requires parent intervention. And I already pointed that out with the personality styles too, because if the parent's view is that success is getting into a good school, getting good grades, doing what they're told, having friends, getting into a top-notch college with a scholarship, and having a career where they're wealthy and they can brag about that kid, that can affect a child. And if you have parents who are deciding that their child is a goof off, this can also affect how the child feels. Children have their own viewpoints, but a different kind of power. So I remember with my own mother, she would say, why can't you kids ever follow through yourself? Why do I have to tell you everything? And I said to myself, not daring to say it out loud, I'd say to myself, oh, I've got ideas. I just know it's not the one idea you're thinking of. So try not to be that kind of parent. Children have their own viewpoints, but a different kind of power. And you, as they mature, you want to have more give and take in that power, but you still give them safe, okay options, not like the sky's the limit. Parent and child viewpoint alignment often affects both emotional and academic well-being, because if they're depressed or if they're mad at you and want to get even, it's going to start affecting a lot of things. Go on. Good. About parental viewpoints. Any questions?
Yeah, well, we'll come back to some of the questions from earlier. This is one of the fun things about conversations with CAGT. I think we've have two viewers from Australia, one from Malaysia, and this is from one of the viewers in Australia. Research in 2015 in Australia suggests that high IQ children are overrepresented in home educating, homeschool for here. With homeschool numbers burgeoning in Australia, I imagine that numbers of high IQ home educated children have too. Is this also the case in the United States? And what are your thoughts on this phenomenon?
Well, first of all, I worked with I spent a month in Australia doing assessments and guiding people. And what I think is, they're choosing, being homeschooled doesn't make your IQ higher. It really is people who have decided to provide what they think their child needs at home rather than fighting the school. And a lot of people, I look at their personality types. Back when I was seeing a lot of clients, I stopped seeing clients. I can be talked into a consultation, but that would be over the phone or Zoom. But I stopped seeing clients and doing assessments at the end of 2017. And part of it was my trusty assistant retired, and I couldn't handle, she was so good with all the paperwork. And so anyway, I decided to finish more writing. The point is, I encourage people, depending on their personality and their viewpoints, to set up a managing schooling from the home. That doesn't necessarily mean they are the teacher, because I really don't want parents to be over-involved, because if they're over-involved, there's a nuance to how the child interprets the parent's motives. They try and please the parent, or they're easily wounded by the parent's nothing the parent even did wrong. They might be wounded anyway. And so you want more of a team, like different people in the community who can be different tutors or groups of kids where the parents are paying for it. And that's what they do in a lot of homeschool situations. And I personally think it's very good that we have any option we need. But the issue is how many of the underlying viewpoints from the parent play a role in this, and they aren't always healthy for the child or the parent. And so I am concerned about that. And I, for one, I've been more and more open about it. I had parents who were not really happy to be parents, and it wasn't a good environment for my brothers and me. And so getting to go somewhere else was my respite. And even though I had good teachers, and I had teachers who let me stay after school to talk to them. It makes a big difference. And so I'm cautious about homeschooling. I took each of my kids out of school from time to time to make sure they were getting what they needed. And sometimes it's just a little more one-on-one attention. But so I think the reason is that it's become more and more in vogue, and the schools themselves have become less and less flexible. I think we need to consider the old one-room schoolhouse, which was all grade levels and age levels, and those teachers were able to do that with those kids. And there was a lot of camaraderie and helping the younger and the older and moving along to what you were ready to learn. But that's the way our public school should be too. And I am quite the policy wonk. And the last sections of my book in particular go into what I think should happen. So it's a big subject.
I've got more questions. Shall we save them for the next
It's up to
point
you.
and keep moving here? So
Yeah,
we've got about 18 minutes left.
yeah.
What do you
Plus,
want to?
they all overlap. So
Yeah,
let's,
don't they? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Your answers cover a large part of your presentation. It's wonderful. So shall we move on, or do you want to do more questions?
Yeah, go on. Let's go on.
Okay.
Then we can do all the rest of the questions. Okay. Yeah, well, there isn't a tables 1 and 2. However, there is a table 13, and if you want it, I'll send it to you. Some personality type preferers or preferences are rule followers, while others are more independently creative. So as a teacher or the parent, for instance, you should be aware of it. Don't try and force people to go against their personality type. I mean, I'm a T thinker, and I'm also very intuitive. So when I taught, say, 6th grade, some of the gifted kids would say, well, I want to do what I used to do a lot of flexible grouping, and they would notice that some kids were being assigned easier material. And why could they just do that? And I said, I'd look at them and I say, no, but I knew, and they knew. And so I said, no, you've got to have the thinking questions at the end, and you have to write some things, and you have to think about it, and you have to show me. And for some of the children in the classroom, that was not something they were ready to do, or possibly they weren't going to be able to do it. So there's a certain amount of deferring to what you know works. And sometimes they make a really good request and you grant it, even though it wasn't on your radar initially, and as a parent or a teacher. Okay. Now, for instance, now my mom was not all bad. And one of the things she did once, I asked her if I could do something, and she said no. And I said, no, why? And she said, well, I almost always say no to you, and you've got to learn that sometimes you're going to be said no to. And I said, well, in this case, this isn't the example we should look at, because it was a really good question and request, and I think the answer should be yes. And she and I talked a little more, and she said, you're right, I'll find a different time to help you get no. And I think parents should be that kind of flexible. And so should teachers. I had a science class I was teaching, and I had worked a couple weeks to get it all laid out and all ready to go. And when I introduced it to the class and we were working on it, they were not cooperating. And I started to get mad inside. And I thought about it, and I looked at them and I said, this just isn't working, is it? And they all went, no. I said, okay, go back to your desks. I'm going to come up with something else. And they were so relieved. But sometimes we force things. And when you get enough consensus that it isn't working, let go of it. Okay. When there is alignment between parents and child, or child and teacher, things go better. So they need to know you're picking up on what they need and want. And sometimes that gives you more power to say, yes, but I do want you to learn how to write well. All right, move on. Okay, gender related. Now, I've been politically incorrect for a long time about the differences between boys and girls, possibly because I only have brothers and I only have sons. And I can tell you, they're different. And it isn't that they're better or worse, it's just a different energy level. And I recommend very highly an author named Michael Gurian. And he does all kinds of things on from children to adults, gender differences. And I love it. I used to have my clients, they couldn't leave without buying his book. What could he be thinking? How a man's mind really works. It's a catchy title, but it really is for women to better understand their boys and their men. And it's almost like shocking to the typical woman to realize they really aren't seeing things the way we are in many cases. So it's important that we look at the gender differences. Schools where you sit there, girls get dexterity for handwriting much earlier than the typical boy. And yet we expect the same behavior. I went to a preschool, it was primary grade and preschool. And this boy, I was there representing his mom and dad, watching, because the teacher was saying he just is always trying to leave the room, get out of his seat. Well, I was watching the room, and it had like 6 boys in it and 9, 10 girls. And when the teacher would tell them what to do, all the girls just immediately got to it. And I'm telling you, every boy in that class was out of his seat at least once. It wasn't just my client. And it was just laughable. But if you don't understand it, you think something's wrong. Instead, you've got to build in walking around time. Maybe we're going to run around outside. Maybe we're going to climb stairs for a while, but give kids a chance to do what they physically need. Then many parents and teachers compare boy behavior to girl behavior and find the boy's behavior is problematic. And this really shows up in families too, where the girls get the good grades and the boy who tested higher perhaps is not cooperating. And there are quite a few kids in my books who it's very confusing to everybody, and it's very painful for the boys. So it's important. Keep going. See, the girls, I mean, I loved school for a number of reasons. And I would get nervous because there would be years when, well, I'll just say it. When I couldn't have a real, true friend in my class, I would be bored and depressed, and mostly depressed. And I tried to get good grades during the years I was depressed. When I had friends, boys and girls, I was having fun. My grades went down. I wasn't depressed. I didn't worry about my grades. And fortunately, my parents didn't worry about my grades either, because, well, my mom made it very clear, B+ is good enough. And I don't even count handwriting skill. So she really freed me up to learn how to be comfortable in the grade getting situation. It wasn't that important. And it is, what you have to understand is when kids go off to college, it's mostly their standardized test scores and their writing ability. If they're B+, but they've done really well on everything else, it's okay. It isn't okay in school, and I'd take them out of the school, frankly, when grades are how they decide whether to move the child into an accelerated course. And often between middle school and high school, they look at grades more than anything else. I think that's a mistake because of the personality stuff. Okay, more boys and some personality types question in-school demands. Many don't earn their ways into classes and opportunities that might be more suitable. And a lot of really smart girls don't either. Okay, move. Okay, is this the last one? I
don't remember, but we have another question that I want to get to from before. And could you say again the author and the title of the book about gender differences that you mentioned?
Well, the author is the same on all of the books. Michael Gurian, Gurain. And the book that I found all encompassing was What Could He Be Thinking? How a Man's Mind Really Works. But he's written, I'm sure, 40 books at least. And he's got a center, the Gurian Institute.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
The question is interesting to me as it really fits with identification in the United States. And typically, gifted learners are identified somewhere around second or third grade.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a great question in the chat. It says, do you find that an okay fit for a school works for kindergarten through second? Is there an age where more academic challenge becomes even more important? So, we're finding out, a lot of us are finding out about our child's giftedness at about second grade.
Right.
And so we haven't been thinking about these things about school. And I think that's where that question comes from.
Okay. All right. Well, usually if you've got a preschool or kindergarten that isn't all that academic anyway, it's going to be fine no matter how gifted the child is, because they're just going to be doing art and music and running around. And the way you can tell whether there's a problem is the thing is, some parents think that giftedness shows up in counting and academic stuff. And the truth is, it's the way they be, it's the way they think, it's what they bring up. And if they have no one to talk to who has a clue what they're talking about, that can be painful. And sometimes not even the teacher understands a child. And they may seem odd. If they're seeming too odd in the setting, it is probably the wrong setting for them. Now, as far as only learning about whether your child is gifted when they get evaluated, I don't buy it. That's why I developed one of the handouts I'm going to give you if you write to me. It's called The Rough Estimates of Levels of Gifted. And I made that up around the time I made up the book, the first book, because they're all very conceptual and experiential. And I made something called the developmental milestones so I could get to know the families before I gave the tests. And I asked them a whole bunch of questions that to learn more about the parents, learn more about what the child did and when the child did it, so that I could see what mattered as far as correlation to actual IQ results. So like sitting up isn't, it is not indicative of being advanced if you sit up early. Same as walking, and same as bowel control. I mean, the more smart you are, the more likely you're going to be stubborn about it. So I've got the proof. But yeah, you just have to pay attention. Don't assume everything's going right. And instead, visit every now and then. It really helps to just visit. And your child will, I really recommend walks and car rides without any other media on to see what kind of conversations start. Instead of asking the child, how was your day? Just say, okay, like you pick the child up, or you say, we're going to go on a little drive. It's nice out. Let's try not to, we won't have the radio on or whatever, and you can't have your iPad, or they're just going to start to talk. And if you do that often enough, you're going to start hearing things. And that's going to tell you whether they've got any friends. And you've got to get kind of crafty about asking without really asking. Like they'll say, well, we did this. And I said, well, who else were you with? And is there anyone there that enjoyed it as much as you did? That kind of thing. You're trying to learn, is your child feeling stunted. Also, if your child's doing way better than everyone else in their reading or their math, or they probably should be accelerated, at least in those subjects. And you should try and get the school to do it. Or you should say, well, I'm going to keep my child home for that subject. I did that once with one of my kids in math, and they started to group after that. They grouped across the grade level, which I told them they should do, and they did. But, you know, I'm an extroverted ENTP. So not everyone can do that, but you might find another parent in the group who will do that. And you'll support that parent, you know, as they get you all what you need. What else?
Well, we are
out of time.
About 1 minute to the end of the time here. So let me go ahead and let's see. I think you had some slides at the end here. Do you want me to get to your end slide, or here, I'm just going to, there was a couple more questions. Oh, there we go. Let me go back to this one then.
Okay.
The second to the last
slide. Make it big again.
There we go.
Thank you. Self-esteem is heavily impacted by the approval or lack of approval from the gifted child's parents. I have a whole chapter on that. And it's through the eye of the beholder. And until you get familiar with what your views are, none of this is going to make a whole lot of difference for you. And I do suggest you look at it, and you can get started on the handouts. My website is 5levelsofgifted.com, and it's words. It's all lowercase words.com, and you don't need www in front of it. And it links to where I write on Medium. I give a lot of this stuff away on Medium. If you don't want to become a member, you can look for my fairly frequent posts where I give you a free link on my Facebook page or other pages around us. Okay, so there's a way to get the information. The book right now, as I said, I might turn it into 3 smaller volumes, but I did lower the price. It's $35, and it's also in Kindle Unlimited and ebook format, which works on any computer, etc. And that's only $9.99, and it's the same long book.
Yeah, it's a big one. It's a big one.
It is
very interesting. And thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us. We really appreciate it, and we love what you have to tell us. I think I'm ready to know more about the personality types, but it really makes me think about how I was and am as a parent, and how I'm, ideally, how would I interact with my own gifted kids? But it makes me think about all these, the kids and the parents that I teach and have been teaching for over 30 years too. And I don't know that I've ever really considered that through the lens of Myers-Briggs personality types, though. When we think about people, we think about personality, but not specifically like.
I've gone to whole schools and let them, the child's version and the teacher's version. And it is so mind-blowing to the teachers to see, oh my gosh, that's that kid. Oh my,
Yeah.
And so there are children's versions on this website too. It's not just for adults. So talk your kids into doing it, no matter what their age. Okay.
And everybody watching, remember that you can catch all of the recordings of these at coloradogifted.org and in the archives under resources and under conversations with CAGT, and join us here back again in 2 weeks, and come to the conference in between time. All right, we'll see you, everybody. Good night.